In lesson 42, we learn about participles. Our authors tell us that participles are adjectives that have binyanim distinctions like verbs. Participles are formed by adding adjective and noun suffixes to the binyanim specific participle forms. Basically, this is saying that participles are adjectives that take verbal forms, the binyanim forms that we have seen from verbs. They take those, but they also take the endings that we have seen on adjectives and nouns. So some have called participles verbal nouns, so they are both noun and verb at the same time. We see this in how they function also. But first, let's take a look at the call active participle. This is the most basic of the participle forms. Here we see the root is amar, which is to speak, and we have added im, which we're used to seeing on adjectives and nouns. This is the unbound form, and here is the bound form. We're used to that. This is o vowel that is new to us. In the singular form, we have the o and e vowel, the holem and the tsere. So this is the form that oa is distinctive of the participle in the call active. The feminine down here, we have the feminine endings that we see on nouns, ot and oat, and a in the singular for the unbound, and ot for the singular and the bound. So we're used to these endings. Again, it is the vowels that are changing according to the different binyanim that the participle is in. So the pattern of the call active participle is distinct and must simply be memorized. That's saying that this is new to us. The OA vowel pattern is new to us. You need to memorize that. The forms for the other binyanim are closely related to the perfect or imperfect in those binyanim. They summarize that here. And what they're basically saying is for binyanim like the nifal, we are already familiar with the noun pattern that we're going to see for the participle. They're basically built off of the perfect and imperfect for those binyanim. The nifal participle is similar to the perfect conjugation, except that it has a kametz in the second syllable instead of a patak. So here we have nishmar, masculine singular participle, versus nishmar, the third masculine singular perfect. So these look very similar, and context is going to help us quite a bit in determining if we're dealing with a perfect or a participle. We can look at the vowels, but sometimes the vowel isn't enough for us to know. Let's take a look at the PL, the hitpil, and the hitfil. These participles are similar to the imperfect, but with the prefix mem. So instead of the prefix that we're used to, such as the third masculine singular imperfect, in the PL we have the yod prefix. The yod's removed and a mem is placed on the front. So the mem takes the prefix spot instead of what we normally see in that binyanim. But we're left with a vowel pattern that we're familiar with, the patak and the tsere with the doubling, the dagish in the second root letter. We have this tav for the hitpil, and with the vowel pattern that we're used to, and hitfil gives us the hirik yod. So these are the different forms of the participles. Now let's take a look at how they function. Like adjectives, participles may be used substantively or predicatively. That is to say that participles can be either the subject or the predicate within the clause. Let's look at how it can function as a subject. Coming from Numbers 25, verse 5, Shoftei Yisrael. So this is a full clause. Here we have the subject, and here we have the object, and the subject is the judges. So the judges of Israel. This can also be translated the ones who judge over Israel, or the ones who are judges of Israel. So here we have a participle functioning as the subject. Let's go ahead and turn the page. The participle can also function as their predicate. The participle may describe an action or event in a clause. The temporal location, or the tense, the time that this is taking place, is derived from the context. The participle does not tell us anything about time. It All the time, or the temporal location, comes from the context. Let's look at Exodus 3:1 as an example. Moshe haya ro'eh et zon yitro. Moses was a shepherd. Here's our participle. Could be translated as was shepherding. Here this is translating it with an English participle, the ing. So Moses was shepherding the sheep of Jethro. So what was Moses doing? He was being a shepherd, and that is what the participle is doing there for us. In 1 Samuel 3:3, we see another example. Shemuel shokev b'heichal Adonai. Samuel was lying in the temple of the Lord. So what was Samuel doing? The participle is telling us that he was lying down in the temple of the Lord. A little more on participles. Participles are often introduced by a he prefix, which functions as a relative marker. So it can be translated as who or what. So it can kind of look like the definite article, but it's not here. Definite articles won't get attached to participles. The he prefix can be attached, taking the place of words like asher, which we would normally see functioning as the relative, but here the he is functioning as a relative. The participle functions predicatively within a relative clause that modifies a noun. Here's an example, Deuteronomy 22:22, ha'ish hashochev im ha'isha. The man, the one who lies with the woman. So we learn more about the man from the participle, and we can translate the he here as who, the one who lies with the woman. The kol binyanim, in addition to the active participle that we saw above, has a passive participle with a u, the shurik, in the second syllable. It also uses adjective endings. So this is just another way that the participle can be used in the call. It can be active. Here we see the passive. Instead of the OA vowel pattern, we have the AU vowel pattern. Same endings though, the noun endings that we're used to. Again, the temporal location or the tense of the call passive participle, like the active participle, is derived from the context. Example comes from Genesis 3:14. Ki asita zot arur ata. Because you have done this, you are cursed. My wife's telling me that I should get some ice cream. All right, thanks for that. So in Genesis 3:14, this example is showing us we don't know if this should be translated past tense, present tense, or future tense. We have to figure that out based on context. And the context would tell us that it should be present tense. All right, so that's participles. We're normally going to translate them with an English participle if it's the predicate, or simply as the subject, as we saw on the previous page, the subject of the clause if it is acting substantively. So participles can be thought of as nouns that are functioning as verbs, or verbs that are functioning as nouns. They're verbal nouns. So that's what we learn in lesson 42, participles.